Islamist propaganda backfires. Canada takes a stand. This is going to be very interesting, Armin. In a contentious turn of events, Birju Dattani, Canada's newly appointed Human Rights Commissioner, resigned before even stepping in his office amid a storm of controversy. The resignation followed an investigation into his appointment, sparked by fierce opposition from Canadian Jewish organizations over his remarks on Israel and his undisclosed use of a second name. The second name was Mujahid Datani. The investigation revealed several troubling aspects of Datani's past, including his promotion of articles comparing Israel to Nazi Germany and equating Palestinians to Holocaust victims on social media. Additionally, Datani admitted to unwittingly speaking on panels with members of Hizb Tahrir, an Islamist organization that explicitly seeks Israel's destruction, and Mozambique, a former Guantanamo Bay detainee once described as a confirmed member of Al Qaeda. The report also highlighted Datani's use of the pseudonym Mujahid in certain contexts and his failure to disclose this information during the application process. As noted in the investigative report, Datani's efforts to downplay the critical nature of his work was concerning, and certainly his failure to directly disclose this work deprived the government of the opportunity to have a discussion. This incident has ignited a debate about the vetting process for high profile appointments within the Canadian government and the delicate balance between personal beliefs and public office responsibilities, while also highlighting the ongoing tensions surrounding discussions of Israel and Palestine in Canadian politics. So let's take a step back and do an overview of what's going on here. So basically, the this man, Birju Tatani, was appointed the director of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. And this is important because among the many responsibilities of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, one of the things is especially basically going after people that say hurtful things that hurt your fifis on the internet. Because unfortunately, Canada does not have free expression the way that we do in the United States, and they can come after you
No one
for.
does apparently.
Yeah, apparently no one does, and well, I'm gonna save my American thumb chesting for later. Chest thumping. Let me. I'll keep it in the box for now. Anyways, so that's having that kind of responsibility in a position of power makes your beliefs and your history of expressing those beliefs and any activism that you might have particularly important. I think we would both agree if you're going to be given that kind of power. And when this man was appointed to this position, a lot of people started to become a little bit concerned about some of his social media activity and some of his history. And basically, it turned into a situation where there was an investigation. They're like, okay, there's a lot of like outcry into this man's appointment. Like, let's investigate what's going on here. And they found that when he was applying for this position, which I think was originally back in 2022, he did not disclose many aspects of his personal history to the Canadian government. One of the things that you're supposed to do in a position of this importance when you're going to work for the Canadian government is you have to disclose any previous names you have ever gone by, any names you have ever used. You have to disclose social media accounts that you previously used. You have to talk about speaking engagements you did, dissertations, articles you published, and maybe activism. You have to talk about your prior activity that is politically relevant. And you have to be forthcoming about your identity. So the thing is that this man apparently grew up in a Hindu background and he converted to Islam. And when he converted to Islam, he took on the name Mujahid. And he didn't talk
Which means
about
that
this.
somebody
Yeah,
who does jihad, basically, mujahid. Yeah, go on.
yeah, like Mujahideen. Um, and he didn't disclose this on his application. In the investigation that they did, apparently he was like, "Oh, I didn't understand that that's what this meant." Da da da. The problem is that the investigation found that this man did not use this second name just as a whimsy. When he chose to use this second name is very deliberate. He would do it when appearing on panels. He would do it when it's speaking to anti-Israel protests at the Israeli embassy. He would do it when speaking particularly to heavily Muslim audiences. And then apparently later in his life he went back to using his birth name, Burju. But the government was like, this is not just an unintentional, "Oh, I used to sometimes use this name and whatever, I just forgot about it and it wasn't that consistent." They're like, "No, there's clearly a pattern of consistency about when you're going by a specific name to, I guess, in a sense, um, like, divvy up your identity, so to speak." Like some people have different names that they work with than what they actually go by in their real life, especially in the activism sphere. And so they found that he deliberately and intentionally omitted a lot of details about his past. And what was so funny is that the National Council of Canadian Muslims declared that this was a witch hunt, that they are going on a witch hunt of racialized people. And that, quote, "it's fine to drag every appointee through the mud as long as they're brown and Muslim," which is hilarious and ironic because the National Council of Canadian Muslims went on a witch hunt several years ago, and the consequences are still ongoing today against the Alberta Human Rights Commissioner. Let me give you guys a little history lesson, okay? There was a man, his name was Colin May, and he had a really impressive resume of public service in the Canadian sphere and also internationally. He was appointed to the position of Alberta's Human Rights Commissioner. And there was a celebration because he was the first gay man in this position. So it's like, okay, look at how this is progress, right? Okay. Not so fast. Because very quickly, the National Council of Canadian Muslims went after this man. They went after Colin May. They slandered his name and they drug him through the mud and sought to destroy his reputation. Now you might ask, why would they do this against Colin May? This is because Colin May, 13 get a load of this. 13 years before his appointment, he had written a book review of a historian's book about Islamic imperialism. And in his book review, he talked about Islam as a expansionist, ideology that had the idea of empire as a very important part of its ideology, and just talking about the history of Islamic empire and conquest, which is a historical fact. And because of this,
And they're proud of that. Like, what? This is not even contested. This is part of Islamic history, and they're proud of them being. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Go on.
he was tarred as an Islamophobe and a racist. And the National Council of Canadian Muslims basically ended his career in public service in Canada after a very impressive history and resume of service that he's lent to the Canadian citizenry. They called him racist and Islamophobic for a book review 13 years before, alleging that his kind of attitudes was what was endangering Black Muslim women. For a book review that people didn't like 13 years beforehand, and he was Islamophobic and racist. So it's so funny how quickly people go from celebrating, "Oh my god, yay! Look at the progress and accomplishment of electing putting a gay man in this position," to dragging him through the mud and ending his career in public office. And I heavily encourage people, especially Canadians, to go look up. There's a lot of details about this online, like in the National Post, about what happened to Colin May, because it is really a warning for what happens when people on the lefty side of things decide to partner with Islamists. Because what Armin was talking a lot about his live stream yesterday, what Pro Palestine doesn't care about Black lives. Go watch the stream that Armin did yesterday. Is that nothing less than total submission is going to be good enough? And Colin has taken action to have legal restitution for what was done to him that was so unfair and so wrong and so slanderous. And it's so, and full disclosure, I have met Colin May. I've actually had the pleasure of working with him. An amazing man. Like, I am so impressed by this man. And it's so wrong to slander someone as racist for the accusation of Islamophobia. One, it doesn't even make sense. But two, for someone of his caliber, like, he and his partner went out of their way to help Arab men who were being persecuted for their HIV status, and like help them find safety and security, help them flee their country because of their HIV status, and told no one. They just did it because that mattered to them, right? And then to be completely abandoned by your party, your coworkers, your colleagues, and slandered and dragged through the mud as a racist and Islamophobe because you're talking about but did a book review over a decade before about Islamic conquest. It's so wrong and reprehensible. And now an incredibly gifted smart man is no longer in service to the Canadian public. So that's why I think it's so freaking ironic that the National Council of Canadian Muslims is now cry bullying over the fact that this man was pulled from he resigned. He was basically forced to resign, investigated, and then resigned before attaining office at the Canadian Human Rights Commission because of extremely concerning activity where he unwittingly did panels with Hizb Tahrir talking with self-admitted Al-Qaeda operatives, not being honest about his name, posting worrying content against the Israeli state. And the Jewish community is like, I have concerns. I have concerns. Is this a person who's going to be in charge of policing my speech rights? Is he going to be applying standards equally? Is he going to be doing a good job when there's a huge spike in anti-Semitism in Canada? I have concerns. I have concerns. I think these are very valid concerns.
I'm actually
yeah, go ahead.
The fact that it takes this level of, anti-Semitic or other problematic views for somebody to get removed. Actually, I mean, this is supposed to be good news, but I consider this a bad news because it has to get to this level for it to be even starting to be problematic. Like imagine all the other Muslims who haven't gotten to this level to but still have views that are illiberal, and the double standard means that they could still climb the ladder of politics in a way that other people with similar views that wasn't within the framework of Islam would not be able to, that there would be harder backlash against them. But they are careful enough not to go as far as this guy for them to be removed, but still problematic enough for them to be a threat to the liberal values and the Western values in Canada. Do you know what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say? Like again, these people represent the tip of the iceberg, and I think like there's a lot more there that will never get removed. That they will, and even if there's a pushback against them, they have an Islamic uh, defense. Like because it comes in the form of Islam, the pushback against them is going to be a lot weaker than it may, like for example, let's say there were Christians with the same level of conservative or views or some illiberal, let's not say conservative, illiberal views, because some conservative views are liberal, but
Mm-hmm.
some illiberal views, but if it was in the framework of Christianity, like Canadian society would have had a much more aggressive allergic reaction to that threat to their way of life or to their values. But with the branding of Islam, then you get a lot more protection. It only
Mm-hmm.
has to get this bad for there to be a
It
reaction
actually
to it.
gets worse. It actually
Oh,
gets
go
worse.
ahead.
Because when you read about this story in like Reuters, it would make it seem as if this man's criticism of Israel is what got him out of this position. According to Jewish News Service, Tatani also provided a draft copy of his PhD dissertation, which he summarized for a Muslim audience, describing terrorism as, quote, a rational and well calculated strategy that is pursued with surprisingly high success rates. He was going to sit one of the largest, most important human rights bodies in the Canadian federal government.
We can't even like with that view. You can't even have like a YouTube account if you have that view and say that. Like you get stricken out of like what the like you would not survive on social media with that view, and then let alone holding a political. Okay, wow, Jesus Christ.
And the investigation that made it so that this
I mean, so,
man
okay, somebody, by the way, somebody's saying that is kind of true though, but I know, but if you say so, the effectiveness of it might be true, but with somebody with that background saying it, okay, that is, imagine if we said it, we would not, people would not look so kindly to that language. Like I'm just saying, there's a double standard here. Whatever your opinion about that is, but go on.
um so but the investigation against him did not find the official investigation said that we did not find evidence of him being anti-Semitic. We found that he made careful distinctions between criticizing the Israeli government versus Israeli people or Jewish people. And according to the government, the reason why they're actually getting rid of him or did this investigation against him and that he willfully resigned, let me be clear, is because of him not being forthcoming and honest about the nature of his history and past. And he tried to say, like, oh, well, he didn't understand maybe the nature of certain questions in the application in the vetting form, or oh, I just kind of used this name on a whimsy, blah blah blah. And they were not buying it. They weren't buying it. And credit where credit is due, because one of the people involved in initiating this investigation against him himself was actually a Canadian of a Muslim background. Credit where credit is due. Um, and I forget what his name is, something Varani. Um, and he was like, "This is no, we can't have this." He very strongly worded emails were sent. Be like, we're not gonna tolerate this. Um, yeah. And so the Jewish News Service talked to Colin May, who himself went through a witch hunt at the hands of the National Council of Canadian Muslims about his opinion on this. And he expressed little sympathy for Tatani, saying sharing a stage with a member of Hizb Tahrir is not a mistake. It is not something that just happens as though one is sharing a stage with other academics. Hizb Tahrir is a notorious terrorist organization banned not only in the UK but in Germany, Indonesia, and most Arab countries. Its stated goals are the creation of a strict Islamic caliphate and the implementation of Sharia globally, along with the elimination of Israel. Hizb Tahrir does not routinely appear on panels with those that are not in support of its agenda, raising questions about why Mr. Datani would be engaged in any format with this group while also under his alias using his middle name.
Hmm. Yeah, so what? Why did that not get him in trouble? Why did? Oh, like, oh, you were just didn't tell us about your activity. If you told us about your um, working with these terrorist groups, would that be fine with the Canadian government? Like, oh, the issue is not that you're talking with these guys and you're having a good relationship with them. The issue is that you didn't tell us. So does that imply? Does that imply that the Canadian government would have been fine if they just knew?
To be fair, I don't know.
Huh.
Um, I part of me wonders if this is a situation where the government, based on technicality and legal proceedings, says that the reason is this one thing, but really it's a totality of other things. But the burden of proof on this technicality, which is not as bad, is easier to establish should there be court proceedings. So that's what they're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
I
like, let's just get rid of you. Let's just use the easiest way to get rid of you without making this legally difficult. Huh?
Yeah, I'm not fluent in the interworkings of the Canadian federal government, but that seems reasonable. Because that's how a lot of things go. It's like we gotta.
Where do you think we're gonna be? Where do you think we're gonna be 10 years from now? Like, I don't know, in Canada, in the UK, in Germany, because this is like 10 years ago. The level of influence that some of these, people with Islamic mindsets they had and they have in politics. If you were 10 years ago, and I told you that right now in the UK, they're Corbyn is making a new party of Islamists. Did you see that? So, I mean, 10 years ago, if anybody mentioned that this is going to happen 10 years from now, people like, no way. Right. But I'm thinking, like, is this trend going to continue? And what is our politics going to look like in Canada or in the UK or in Germany? Are we going to have like a lot of Islamist parties and we have to like now take them, the things that they are not saying, the things that are getting them removed, are these the same things that at some point is going to be the official position of certain parties within these countries? Like, is
Saying
that what we're looking?
quiet part out
uh,
loud.
yeah, not only out loud, the official manifesto of our party in
Mhm,
Canada. Like,
mhm.
is that what we have to look forward to? Okay, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. Part of me is I'm a bit conflicted because I see around me, and maybe it's because this is the world that I swim in. Like this is what I spend like all my time on. I see a real thirst for movements and individuals and organization and to counter this. At the same time, I don't know how much of that is my own personal bias. Then on the other hand, the rest of me is like, the problem is that is it too little too late? Because what a lot of people don't understand is how organized the Islamists are in Western countries. They have been established for many decades now. They have funding networks that are very well established. They have their own little internal economic system where they're all funding each other, like all the way down. Like Islamic schools getting their pencils from Islamist manufacturers, everything down to the uniforms. Like w- they they're the there is a very well entrenched network, and their institutions have and organizations have been operating and building a base and building political capital and building force within the political body for decades. If people are waking up now and starting to mobilize and, get interested in the nature of this threat and want demand action behind it, are they organized enough? Do they understand the nature of this well enough? I don't know. I don't know. When it comes to the United States, I know we have that down. I know we have that down because I feel incredibly honored to be working with some of the leading people studying the funding networks, like investigating different think tanks that they influence, in investigating, where the money is going, how the nonprofit system is abused, how they're posting, like Islamist nonprofits are posting, side by sides with different terrorist groups in Gaza. Like in the United States, I feel very secure in that we have extremely skilled and intelligent people working thoroughly on this issue. They're tracking this with a fine-toothed comb, like a freaking, I don't even know, like a neurosurgeon just in there. However, that being said, I don't know to the extent that they have that in other countries. For example, like the think tank field, industry, whatever, the think tank environment is not as well developed in Canada as in the United States. So the people going out and doing this research and building these reports and exposing this and then sitting in front of congressional hearings, talking to policymakers. I don't I don't know to what extent there is that level of expertise and investigation going on in other countries. I know that we have it more in the US versus Canada, but I don't know about, I don't know, like Sweden or
Well,
whatever.
yeah, I mean, whatever this is, we have more of that in US than any other country, regardless. Most we could. Okay, so
So,
let's do the comments and the super chats, and then we need to go to the next news because there's one of the comments I want to respond to. Because yeah, go on, let's go. You go ahead.
okay. Oh, we got a super chat from Erkin. Thank you. Saying hello from Izmirnistan. Happy to see this as the first news. Well, I'm glad, I try to come with some good news because a lot of times it just feels like the world is a dark place. Um Oh, this is cute. So Nike is saying Susanna is cute. Heart, Armin, respect for what you do. Thank you. Um D is saying our tolerance is killing us. See,
Well, I mean,
tolerance
so
of intolerance is cowardice. That's a quote by Ian Hercieli.
this is I wanted to highlight this last because I wanted to go through the super chats, but before we get to this one. But now that you highlighted, let me respond to this first. Okay, so this is what D is talking about is what we call the paradox of tolerance, right? By famously explained by Karl Popper, right? And the problem is, how do you solve it? I mean, it is a paradox, but how do you solve it, right? Because if we are tolerant of people, so for society to work, for society to progress, we need liberty and we need some limitations. But the limitations need to be limited. They cannot be based. We cannot limit people expressing their ideas. The limitations are supposed to be protecting the framework where all the competition between these ideas could happen. The limitations should be the rule of law, but a limited rule of law where it just protects the nation state and the safety and security of the people who live within it. And then when it comes to the ideas, then it's up to the citizens to be able to fight them. But to be able to have a limited rule of law where it doesn't force its way on people, force its weigh on people for the way of life or what it thinks is correct, because the people have to decide what is correct on themselves. It at least has to protect the liberty, right? So we're saying like, oh, don't mess in people's lives, give them liberty, only have limited rule of law where you protect this framework and everything else should be free. Well, what if the people there decide to make the rule of law something that limits liberty? Like, what if people have illiberal values and we like don't meddle with people's lives? Well, what if people are pushing for something that doesn't respect liberty, like whether Islamism or Nazism or communism or anything, or any other views that then what do? Do we let them? Do we let them give them? Do we tolerate them to the point where they change the system until we are not free at all? But if we want to change the system when they are not free, then now we have violated our own rule, and now we have a government that restricts liberty, and now we basically screwed ourselves, because in fighting that monster that wants to reduce liberty, now we created our own monster that reduces liberty. So the solution, it seems, to this paradox, so either we are fighting a monster or we become the monster that we're fighting, as Nietzsche puts it, the solution seems to be a third element. So we have the state, we have the individual, and we have a relationship between the state and an individual, but there's something here in the middle that is missing, and I think that is the solution, okay? And that is the community, the non-government institutions that are supposed to be the third actor that comes and defends those values, because for all of this to be put together, there needs to be institutions and people that promote and protect the culture and the values, that they are not state actors, but they are as powerful as a collective. So we have the state, we have individuals, and we have collectives in the form of non-governmental institutions, as in the form of this
Civil society organizations.
Civil society, where they have to come and basically promote the idea of valuing liberty. And that's basically, you guys, we're a small part of it. And that is how you win this fight. That is how this battle is won. So this is how you have to create the framework of understanding what is the role of the individual, what is the role of the state, and what is the role of civil society in the form of not community and non-governmental institutions.
This person is not understanding, and let me clarify something. Why do we need NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to defend values? You're not making sense. Here's a very simple example. A organization that is dedicated to protecting journalists and the free press and monitoring threats to the free press, or an organization that is dedicated to bringing together lawyers that defend human rights law or protect lawyers when they are also being threatened for their own efforts to protect civil rights law. I mean, it's stuff like that.
Well, hold on. No.
That's only one example.
Don't remove it. Okay, so but look at the question. Why do we need NGOs to defend values? But here's, you're making no sense. Okay, but you are here. Atheist Republic is a non-governmental organization, and you are here right now, and we are defending values, and you are, like, the fact that you're here and consuming this content is an endorsement of a non-governmental organization defending values. So I don't know how you're saying we're not making sense while you're participating in the very thing that we're advocating for. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, that was it. Or legal organizations that are dedicated to preserving free expression and fighting for free expression, like FIRE, making sure that there's academic freedom on campuses. Like, there's so many examples of this. And yeah, I'm not going to go further. Vishnu Prasad gave a super chat, thank you, saying majority Muslim kids will be ex-Muslim in the West. I don't know if the evidence completely bears that out. Studies by XMNA estimates that results are about 25% of kids from Muslim backgrounds born in the West will leave Islam. It was the first study of its kind to examine that kind of question. What's interesting to consider is that I like to follow a lot of British Islamists. And one of the most notorious British Islamists is a man named Dilly Hussein, who works for an organization called Five Pillars UK. And I remember seeing a tweet from him, which I thought was very revealing. And he was basically saying, you know, some of us in the Muslim community were worried about our children basically not staying true to their background and their allegiance to Islam, essentially. But it was the Palestinian movement, which is reigniting their identity and bringing them closer and bringing them back in, which is very interesting coming from a hardcore Islamist that literally sits down with and promotes the Taliban. Um, so I don't think it's quite that simple. Um, then Yusuf Dumphy gave a super
But
chat.
wait, hold on. You should give me a chance to
Oh,
respond.
sorry.
So the numbers that we have right now is 25, like at least in the United States, 25% of second generation Muslim from Muslim community are leaving Islam. So that's a very high rate. Okay. However, we also have people converting to Islam, and I think they cancel each other out, right? So they're equal, but the good thing is that ours is increasing on a much more rapid pace, at least in the United States, not in Europe, right? So the thing is that we have to look at the trend, because 25% leaving Islam used to be closer to zero, right? So right where we are right now is not necessarily where we are going to be 10 years from now. So if we got from close to zero to 25%, if we could in the next 10 years, if we get that to, I don't know, 40%, that would be amazing. And again, not remember, if 25% are leaving Islam, that means that there's a much higher percentage that is remaining Muslim but living less Islamic lives, right? That's also a win. So even if you remain a Muslim but you're less Islamic, that's also a win for us. 25%, like let's say 25% leaving Islam, suggest, I don't know, maybe 70% or 80% of them living less Islamic lives. So those are the numbers that we have to pay attention to. Anyways, let's continue.
And Anjunier just gave a super chat saying, make citizenship class part of the education system, crying emojis. Armin, yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So this is actually a very interesting point. So there's different levels of state involvement, right? So we have, Susanna, are you listening to this? Because I know you have to go, but I want to know if you're hearing this while you're away, because I want to respond to it. Well, okay, good. Okay, go listen to this, because it's very, I want Susanna to hear this, right? Because we have different levels of state involvement, right? We have total state neutrality, and we have total state coercion when it comes to values, right? So when, let's say, for example, we think, should there be something that the state itself, so we have the nation and we have the state, right? So if you believe in complete state neutrality, you believe the nation, the people themselves should be let loose. They should be free to figure out what's good, to chase the good, define what is good in their life and chase it. And the state should be absolutely neutral. The state should just provide the framework. The state should basically just protect the nation state, the nation, and individuals themselves will go and figure out what is good, and the state itself will have no bias over that, right? And then we have this is the extreme one end, and the extreme other end is, no, the state will decide what is good, and it will enforce that good. It would, using coercion, it would implement like that good, right? But there are people in the middle. Some people say it's impossible for the state to be completely neutral, because for the state to be neutral, that would be in itself a good that the state has to believe in. So the state cannot be, there's a, for example, let's say liberty. So the state should not meddle in the people's affairs and let them be free. Well, that itself is a value that the state has to believe in for it to do that. So complete state neutrality is impossible. So if we identify certain things that we define as good, and the state wants to not be neutral, coercion might be too much state involvement in what is good. But what about promotion? Or a lower, something below promotion is the state does not promote it, but will have the goal. Like, let's say, for example, the state believes in liberty as a good. It maybe even some people say, like, okay, that's a goal that the state should be after, but without even promoting it. Even the promotion of it should be up to society itself, to civil society itself. So we have 4 levels: complete neutrality, the state defining a good but not promoting it, having that good but just saying, like, okay, I'm going to try to get to this good without even promoting it to the society. And then that's the second level. The third level, the state defines a good and actively promotes it through the education system, so there's more government involvement. And then the fourth version is that the state uses coercion or laws, right? So for example, the state says, like, I believe in diversity, and we're going to force the society to believe, for example, in diversity. That this is our value, and we're going to uphold these values in this nation state, for example. So that would be laws, coercion. So this is what you're advocating for, is the third level of involvement when it comes to the state defining it good and promoting it. Again, I didn't take a slide. I just give you the 4 levels. Anyways, let's go.
Breaking it down.
Breaking it down.
Idris is saying, just liked the stream. Yes, everyone, please remember to like the stream. Pray to the YouTube gods, the only gods that we believe in. And Oscar de la Llanta saying, I'm Israeli and I love this channel. Let me try to improve my Spanish. Oscar de la Llanta. There we go. That was a bit better. Oh, we did that one. GJ is saying, as far as I know, thank you for the super chat, GJ. As far as I know, the balanced line and laws limiting freedom, speech, and expression, the balanced line must be drawn such that intolerance can never be tolerated.
Yeah, but that needs defining. Like,
yeah,
intolerated as in to what extent? Like, can somebody express their views that they want intolerance? Like, are we going to make that speech illegal? So, for example, if that's, again, that is not specified to what extent we want, how we want to stop it, to what extent do we want to stop it? Because with that mindset, if you want to go all in, then much speech will be illegal. A lot of speech, including all religions could get banned based on that standard. And again, who's to say which opinions are going to lead to tolerance? Like, racism will be banned, and speech that many people will perceive as racist, that maybe is not racist, could be banned. Or maybe speech that is not even racist but could lead to racism could be banned.
Yeah.
So again, if we want to ban intolerance, then you just open the hand of the government to just decide. We just created a truth ministry. Again, that's why I think the third element needs to be introduced to the system. We have the individual, we have the state, and we have communities. And this is why we have a whole branch of political theorists called communitarians, because they believe in the power of this third entity. But again, that's. By the way, guys, do you like it? Do you want me to go into this level of detail, or is that boring? Like, let me know in the live chat when we get philosophical here, or tell me. Yes.
You can tell Armin's been studying up on his political theory. Cajun American is saying, at what point does a community become a state, i.e. a homeowners association versus county officials? Are they unelected experts? This reminds me of the anti-Catholics of the 1970s. I swear to God, I am going to be when it's time for me to purchase a home, I'm going to be organizing my life so that I do not have to have an HOA. It seems like the pit of hell. um, at what point does a community become a state?
Oh
Well,
wait,
a
let me,
state or its own
the enforcement.
what's the word I'm looking like domicile? That's not exactly the word I'm looking for. Like at a certain point, a certain community can decide that they want to become their own city. A
The
state is something else.
community, the community is not the state. The community can have a state. That's why we call it a nation state. We have a nation as a state. Okay. So the community can have a state, and the state part of the community is the part that is enforced, doing the enforcement, doing
Mhm.
the doing is basically the legislation and the enforcement of that. I mean, take the enforcement, because the legislation is also part of the enforcement, or without the enforcement of legislation, the legislation doesn't mean anything else. So whenever within the society, the part that is doing the enforcement is called the state, and the part that is not doing the enforcement is called civil society.
Um, okay, so that brings us to the end of the super chats. Oh, Levantex is
So, for
asking,
example, let's
Susanna
say, so for example, let's say we're 10 people, right? And we're fighting, and we're working together, and we're cooperating, and we're trading with each other. And some of us sometimes cheat, and we think like, okay, this is like, or we don't like this, so we hire 2 of our 10 to just make sure that everybody is being fair. Those 2 people are basically the state now. The 2 people that are basically, let's say like the 2 of us are very among the 10 of us, 2 of us have more muscle and we're stronger, and like, you know what, you guys are stronger, you guys, you can stop fishing and stop picking fruits and stop like making clothes for everybody. We just give you very big sticks, and you just watch the rest of the 8 of us, and just make sure that we're all playing, we're just being fair. That's the state. Those 2 people are now the state. Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.